Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. I like to invite here Magdalena Paul. I really like and I'm really looking forward for her lecture because she prepared for us a great topic, fake news, and how we perceive it. And I think fake news are very important topic, especially in these days, because during the war in Ukraine, the information is one of the battlefields for this war. So we can begin.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with you today, although virtually. Thanks for having me. And we will talk about fake news. And this is actually a very important topic, and it becomes more and more important. As we can see, as Ina just said, manipulated information is unfortunately used in wartime before our very own eyes. So I think if not now, when we will be talking about it. This presentation consists of 9 parts, as you can see on the slide, and I try to put a lot of links to the articles, to some lectures, some even documentaries or podcasts. You might find them interesting and, you know, get some more from these resources. Generally, fake news, disinformation, and perception of true and false information are the very broad topics. So here we will make some kind of an overview. We will not go very deep into one particular topic, although we will go to deep fakes, so it's a bit deep. I would like to start with what fake news is. This term appears very often in public debate. You probably know that. Different people attribute different meanings to it, and sometimes they even treat it as an insult. So I think it's very important to look what we really mean when we say fake news. And I would like to start with a little story from my own life. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, so I was like 11, 12 years old, we had some lessons about society, civil culture. I don't know if you had this kind of lessons in primary school, but when I was a child, we had it in primary school. One of the tasks was to write down some headlines of the news every week. We had to note generally what important happened in Poland and in the world for the past week. And our teacher checked to see if we had written something in our notebooks, but she never spoke to us about these events. We never had any discussion about it. Generally, you had to write it down, it was marked, and that was all. So it didn't take long for some people to just copy the headlines from one each other. You probably know what copying homework is. It happens. Well, one day I had this idea that maybe other than copying, we could make up some news. And I created this short story about some pupils in Brazil, children in school in Brazil, having been eaten by rats at school. As an adult, I can see that general construction of this story is highly problematic, but I'm telling you as it happened. So I wrote down such a headline in my notebook, and I started persuading my friends, my colleagues, to write it down too. You know, after all, the more people heard about it, and the more people wrote it down, the more probable it was. That's how it works. So we also developed the story further, added some details, someone changed it a little bit in case we got caught and the teacher wanted to ask us additional questions. But she didn't. And the lesson continued. So this is my first fake news adventure, fake news adventure in my life. And sometimes, I think that the fact that I deal with this topic in my research is kind of a character arc. So coming from a villain to the researcher. So that's my story. And I would like to get to know how you understand fake news. What do you think about it? What are your associations? And I think that's the cool tool and very nice, very effective to get to know that would be Mentimeter. I think you used it before, right? Great. So please go to menti.com and enter the code that is on the screen, which is 73747447. It's a beautiful code.
I put it into the chat. Okay, great. And you can easily copy paste.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And I will start presenting this question. The question is, what do you think of when you hear the phrase fake news? And please put up to 5 associations, 5 topics that comes to your mind when you think fake news. And we will wait for answers and then we can discuss it. And I think I'll stop sharing for a second to go to the Mentimeter to show it when the answers will come. Okay. Anyway, if I say I will show you something and I don't show you that, please give me a call. Give me a sign, okay? Because it happens sometimes. Okay, we have first answers. Yeah, internet, information, manipulation, Donald Trump. Yeah. Donald Trump is getting bigger and bigger, so more people are saying and writing that it's their association.
Yeah, great ideas. I like it.
Yeah, something which isn't true, something not true. Propaganda. It's in news, yeah. America, generally, yeah, a lot of fake news in their politics. Social networks as a natural territory for fake news. Journalism as a general idea for fake news. We have something false, something which isn't true. Worldwide problem, money, agenda, emails. Yeah, sometimes maybe you got some emails from your, for example, family talking about something about COVID. It used to happen a lot during the first wave. Disinformation, media, yeah, lies. It's a very nice discussion. I think it's been going on for about 2 years. If we should call fake news lies, if we should say, oh, for example, great example, Donald Trump created fake news, or we should say Donald Trump lied. And there's this question if the word lie doesn't poison in some way the public discussion. And there's this argument made by some journalists, but also some people think that that's a general good description of what is going on when someone is someone knows that is not telling the truth, but tells it anyway. Okay, so thank you very much for that. We will go a little bit about politics, but not too much. We will talk a bit about Donald Trump, but also not too much, because I think we have more important topics to discuss. We will try to find a difference between disinformation, misinformation, and what is interesting also, malinformation. We have this term also. And we will see what is going on with media. Thanks, guys and gals. Okay, so again, sharing the presentation. Okay. So we can work on my story for a second now, because it's as you probably noticed, it had many of the classic fake news features, characteristics that is often enumerated when we try to define fake news. So the story was intentionally false, and fake news is intentionally false as well. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of a tongue. It was just plainly made up from the beginning to end. The story was also verifiably false. It means that it was possible to check whether the story was true or false. The teacher was able to check the previous week's newspapers, TV programs, and show us that the incident had not been reported anywhere. Or she could just ask, is it true? Did it happen? Well, and those two characteristics are the most important when we are talking about fake news. If we tell someone, oh, that's probably fake news, and this person would ask us, why do you think that this is fake news? We would say, look, this is intentionally false, and I can verify that. I can show you some evidence that it didn't happen or didn't happen in this way. But this particular story from the 4th or 5th grade had some additional characteristics that we sometimes find, but not always when we talk about fake news. It was kind of exotic for pupils in Poland to talk about something like that. It was about a distant country, sometimes very unbelievable fake news is about different cultural groups, also about historical events, things that if you're not a specialist in that topic, you cannot verify in a couple of seconds. It was also, and many fake news is sensational, very emotionally charged. One of the main goals of disseminating fake news is to change or maybe boost your emotions, especially fear, frustration, anger. And we, as a group, as students, had some hidden motives. We wanted to pass the task and also outsmart the teacher. And many fake news are created with a malicious intent, but not all of them. Some of it is, just joking or trolling, if you might call trolling just joking. But then it starts to live their own lives in global web. And it's good to remember that for one person's joke might be some other person's fact. And the last characteristic, it was a group effort. Fake news is such an effective tool because it has a great potential to go viral. Some studies show that news that is negative sensational and evoking strong emotions spreads much faster and reach a wider audience. So those are general characteristics of fake news. Of course, in this 4th or 5th grade, we didn't call it fake news. We didn't really know what we were doing. And before, as you can see, generally 2016, 2017, we weren't really using the term fake news to say that politician said something that was false, verifiably and intentionally false. We used other terms, sometimes lying, sometimes manipulation, sometimes misinformation. Brian McNair, one of the researchers that started writing about fake news phenomena, links the first use of the term fake news with the activity of Paul Horner, whose invented stories were presented in 2013 in the media as real. So he made something up, and some people thought that those were real stories. Some also internet hoaxes that were supposed to be real were presented in media as well in this sense. Generally, the usage of fake news in media went from, like 10 per month in 2015 and early 16 to several thousand during the 2016 US presidential election. And you can see it partially in a graph. This is the Google Trends graph, which is showing percentage of searches compared to this point that we had the most of the searches. And we are seeing the tremendous increase in searches in late 2016 and early 2017. And I think you guessed already what this could be the result of. Of course, it's Donald Trump and his usage of fake news. And I also wanted to ask you about this pick, this 100% pick. Let me tell you that it was March 2020. What do you think?
COVID?
Yes, it was a COVID pandemic. Generally, a lot of information was circling, and WHO, the World Health Organization, and a lot of media were talking about fake news about COVID. So that's probably why people were trying to get to know, to check this kind of fake news. Okay. The problem with the statistics that I showed you before is that the term fake news can be understood differently by different speakers or writers, as well as by the audience. One person can, is typing fake news, searching in Google to find out what did Donald Trump mean, and some other person wants to just read some funny stories in the internet. So two scientists, Nielsen and Graves, conducted focus groups in several countries, in Great Britain, Finland, Spain, and United States. And they asked people, what do they think fake news is? And they identified four main types of content that people associate with the term fake news. And you can see those four main fake news types in this red table. These are poor journalism, propaganda, so also something that you put in Mentimeter, advertising, bad advertising, I should say. So clickbaits might be considered fake news sometimes. This kind of advertisement when you have, for example, very sensational title and you have to know what happened to this particular person, and then the whole article is about something else and nothing happens usually. So And the fourth type is just the classic fake news, as I call them. So the more narrowly defined false news, some fabrications, some hoaxes. And the difference between fake news and real news is not absolute. It is gradual. It's the most, I think it's a very important thing to have in mind when you think about the evaluation of journalism. Where is the border between good journalism and poor journalism? And maybe good journalism for one person is a bad journalism, poor journalism for another. And you can see that outside this table, we have satire. It's an interesting case because in this particular study, it was clearly distinguished by the participants and just seen as funny and not very harmful. But many fake news uses language more similar to the satirical materials than real news. Fake news articles use fewer technical words, shorter words. They have less punctuation, fewer quotes. They are more redundant in terms of vocabulary, so more repetition of the same words. And fake news titles are longer than real news titles, and they use more all capitalized words, sorry, or if you're like, because it's more for American language, English, American English. And I think in Polish and in Czech, we would just talk about capitalized words. We had a guest for a second. So it's for some people, for example, for non-native speakers, it might be hard to distinguish between satire and fake news, especially because of the humor is very specific for some of the languages. Like for British humor, you have a lot of irony, and generally irony is not very well translated into other cultures.
And can I ask which role play the context of the information? Like if I know I am on the satire page, some funny stuff, I perceive the information in another way.
And generally, that's a very interesting question, because some of the satirical sites tries to try to look like real news sites. Like there are actually people who think that Onion is a real news. In Poland, we also have a portal that is called Aż Dziennik, which looks a bit like normal informational portal. It is a satirical portal, but there is also a Gazette newspaper that is called Nasz Dziennik. So there's a difference of one letter N, at the very beginning of Nasz Dziennik. And there are also people who think that Aż Dziennik is a real newspaper, the same as Nasz Dziennik. Sorry for Polish.
Oh, it's okay.
But you know, so with even when it's a context of a satirical page, some people think that it might be real. Okay, let's go. Let's go to Claire Wardle, who was also working for trying to, create this typology of fake news. And she actually enumerates satire as one of the types of misinformation and disinformation. Who will just in a second go to misinformation and disinformation and the differences. And she actually says that one person's joke can be a big news for another. We have other types, more classic, I would say. we have a misleading content, imposter content. For example, in the first wave of COVID-19, we had, for example, people claiming to be doctors, or even doctors that are not specialized in viruses and epidemics. So they were making some bold statements about the topic of COVID, and we would call it imposter content. We can also see here fabricated content. So, like 100% pure fake news. We see here also false connection. So clickbaits, as I said, or just pictures claiming to be taken in one country, but they are from another. And it is very common now with a Russian invasion in Ukraine. And I will actually show you one example of that. We have false contextual information, very hard to distinguish this kind of fake news from real news when we don't know the real context, and a manipulated content, so something that is photoshopped or some deep fakes. And some people don't like the term fake news because, as this the terms that are in fashion at the moment, it is used from left to right, and it's almost coming out from your fridge. It's so popular. It is also sometimes not very precise. As you can see, we have different typologies, we have different meanings. Some people, for example, as I said, Claire Wardle, they use alternative terms, and misinformation is just a false information, but it wasn't created and disseminated with harmful intent. So some error in text, some inappropriate photo or video selected for the news material. We have disinformation that was created and shared by people with harmful intent, and malinformation, which is this quite interesting case that someone is sharing genuine, real information with intent to cause harm. And it's just a topic of generally cyberbullying, for example, or revenge porn, this kind of cases. Okay, so I think now some words about the whole history of fake news, because if I was lying in my 4th or 5th grade, people were lying always. It's just something that we do as a species. And one of the reasons is that the human languages, as the whole, has a very special feature that is called displacement. And this means that a person can talk about things that are not happening here and now. So we, as a humankind, can create a story, and those stories might be true or might be false. A modern worldview with a scientific concept of truth that we know today began to take shape around 14th, 15th century. So generally not very long ago. During the Middle Ages, it seems that dividing lines between what people perceived as false and true were very much more blurred. What showed the deeper metaphysical meaning of the word was considered true, not something factual. Also, people traveled very little in the beginning because it was associated with numerous dangers and high costs. And the stories of those who traveled even to not other countries, but further regions of the countries, enjoyed great interest, and stories of those who returned from distant lands sometimes seemed very improbable. And sometimes they were just lies. In 1144, the Christian Crusaders suffered a defeat at Edessa. And shortly after, rumors began to circulate of a wealthy Christian king ruling in the East. And he was called Prester John. He wanted to come to the aid of the crusade participants. In 1165, there were copies of a letter from Father John, as he was called, addressed to the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Comnenus, describing his kingdom and the fantastic creatures inhabiting it. The letter was probably written by a European monk who wanted to encourage knights and make them hope for victory. And this monk could have been inspired by legends about the adventures of Alexander the Great. So that's one of the first documented fake news. During the Enlightenment, people knew much more about the world around them, and the science developed significantly. People read much more often than in previous centuries, as you well know, and the press gained great popularity. In the 18th century, some publications had a noble cause. They were to expose naivety and draw attention to social problems. In 1747, the newspapers published a speech by a woman called Polly Baker, who was to be brought before a court 4 times for extramarital sexual relations, which were legally forbidden. So Polly, in her speech, criticized a law that punished women and their children, but not the fathers. And for a time, it was believed to be a transcript of a real speech given in a courtroom. But in effect, this woman did not exist. And this text was written by Benjamin Franklin, that you know very well, who opposed an unjust law, and he actually had a son from an extramarital relationship as well. In the 19th century, the lives of many people in Europe changed dramatically. From our point of view, it's important to say that in 1811, the Koenig high-speed printing machine appeared, and it revolutionized the publishing of the press. In 1833, Benjamin Day, publisher of the New York Sun, noted that publishing sensational stories aimed at the average working class reader, average man and women. By doing that, he could achieve considerable readership and of course add revenue as well. So in August 1835, the New York Sun published information that the famous British astronomer John Herschel had invented a telescope that allowed him to study the moon, and that he discovered life on moon. And new discoveries were reported through the week, and unicorns were discovered on the moon, fire beavers, whatever they are, and humanoid creatures with bat-like wings, and you can actually see them on this picture, and they were called Vespertilio Homo, so generally bat people. Some people were skeptical, to say the least, about this great discovery. So on September 16, 1835, the New York Sun admitted that the discoveries might be a lie. It might be a lie. But if so, the newspaper itself fell victim to it. So they never said that they made up this information. 19th century is also the beginning of photography, as you know. And at the very beginning, the whole invention of capturing images on a metal plate or glass seemed unbelievable in itself. And photos seemed to be a fraud. So no wonder that when the photomontages did appear later, people were inclined to believe that it's real. We have a lot of interesting examples, but let's talk about the so-called Silent City. In 1885, a prospector for gold in Alaska, so the guy who was trying to find gold, he actually did get some gold. Dick Willoughby reported he saw a mirage on the glacier. He claimed it was a vision of a vast city, and you can see this vision in the picture. So he saw thousands of prints of this photo, and he had taken, and he worked as a glacier guide until someone noticed that this silent city is actually a picture of Bristol in England that was superimposed on a blurred background. But he got some gold. And you can find much more interesting and, to be honest, quite funny stories like that in a book by Alex Bosey. And I checked, and it's actually in Czech, and you can find it in your library. Okay, but let's go back to today. I would like to give you some data on how often people come across fake news in Europe, and they come from a public opinion poll called Eurobarometer. And this survey was conducted in all European Union countries in 2018. So 68% of respondents said they come across fake news at least once a week, and more than 1/3 almost every day or every day. And for comparison, I also show data for the countries where the indicators were the highest and the lowest, and for the Czech Republic and Poland. So we can see that the Spaniards seem to encounter fake news the most, and Finns the least. Both in Poland and the Czech Republic, we encounter false information a little more often than the EU average. And 71% of Europeans were totally or somewhat confident that they were able to identify fake news. And the confidence level for the Czech Republic and Poland is very similar to the average, as you can see. And those who used online social networks more regularly and who came across fake news more frequently were more confident in their ability to identify them. And that is actually the very important issue. We call it immunization for fake news. In other words, vaccination for fake news. Generally people think that when they see some kind of fake news, they will have more competence to find it, to verify it, to spot it another time they see it. But studies show that there's no immunization effect. And even a single prior exposure to fake news headlines makes us more likely to believe in a sad news after some time. In other words, the more fake news you see, the more vulnerable you are. In addition to this effect, trust in media is also important when we talk about believing or spotting fake news. You can see here that Europeans in general have more trust in the so-called traditional media like radio, television, and press than online media. But if we look at the countries or regions, it looks a little different. And of course, there's a lot of historical and sociological issues. Trust in traditional media in Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary is lower than the average in Europe and much lower than the Scandinavian countries, for example. Something interesting happens when we look at electronic media. We see a certain reversal, especially when it comes to video and podcasts or social media. We can see that the trust of Czechs and Polish people is a bit higher than, for example, Germany, but also Finland, Austria as well. Another factor that plays a role in dealing with fake news is information literacy. And I think that's a very well-known term for you. Part of information literacy is the ability to evaluate the reliability of information. It's a very hard word to say, reliability. In trying to investigate this, I checked if there were differences between how students read true and false information. And I would like to tell you a bit about this study. So we will first try to read something. So please look at the slide and try to observe how your eyes are moving when you are reading this text. Try to read it and, focus on your eyes. What is happening?
I can answer.
Mm-hmm.
I read the beginning, then I jump
Yes.
some in the middle of the text, and then I jump again to the end of the text, and I said to myself, okay, it's lorem ipsum, and there is no interesting information for me in it.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand Latin.
It's not Latin.
It's not Latin, okay.
It's just, nonsensical words.
Okay.
Yeah. But, it's very hard to observe your own eyes. It's generally hard. But it's hard to focus on the way your eyes are moving when you read something. And you probably saw some of the bad actors trying to act like they are reading. So there are a few tactics. Some actors will just, sit there. I will take my phone and just look, and nothing, just look. Some other will move the head and trying to read something. And some other will just move I cannot stop moving my head, but move the whole eyes, yeah, from one end to the other. But generally, our eyes are not working like that. And as Nina said, there was a lot of
jumping.
A lot of jumping. The movements of the eyes are involuntary and reflexive. So that's why it is so hard and so unnatural when we are trying to focus and observe and try to read and try to act like reading. And the eyes generally move constantly. They are never in one spot, and they are adjusting to their position to the image. So when we are reading the text, we do not move our eyes from to look at each letter or even to look at each word sometimes. The eye movement is also not even. It's not like, very gentle, very smooth movement from one side to the other. It is performed in leaps and bounds, these little jumps. And these eye jumps are called saccades. And each saccade ends with a fixation. It's a temporary stop of the eyeball movement, very quick, on a fragment of the text. And the fixation is very important because information is perceived during fixation, not during saccades. So to get to know more about what we are looking at, how we are reading, we are using eye tracking. And this is a technique by which we register these little jumps and fixations. Thanks to this, we are able to say exactly what order, and in what order and for how long the person was looking at the particular spots. And the device that records eye movement is the eye tracker, and you can see two types of eye trackers here. It's this device, this real rectangular device that is attached, for example, to a computer screen. And I use this kind of a tracker during this study, or it can be attached to special, let's call it glasses. They sometimes have the glass, sometimes they don't have the glass in the glasses. So during the test, students were asked to read 4 articles, and you can see translated titles of those articles on the screen. And they were then asked to evaluate their reliability on the scale from 0, which was totally unreliable, to 100, which is totally reliable, and to justify their ratings. And I think that the students were actually in your age because they were on the first year of the studies. The catch was that 2 of the articles contained fake news. And I'm interested if you could spot those fake news articles. You can try and say it, you can write it in chat, which one you think are fake. But remember that Polish politics is very weird sometimes. And you don't have to know a lot about Polish politics to answer.
I think, for example, that D is fake news because there's like aggressive and jerking. It's emotional, so.
The word rejected might be perceived as emotional, I think. Nicola? Yeah, obligation. Yeah, okay. It's a one proposal.
No, I was talking about the letter D.
Oh, D, okay. Yeah. Sorry. D, aggressive man jerking a policeman. Internet users on the track. Yes, that one was a fake news. And it was actually a real life fake news. So the article taken word by word and with the whole layout from a real site. So I'll tell you that C was also manipulated. It's an information from satirical portal. That's why I was talking about satire at the beginning. But it was edited in the way that it looks like the article from one of the most popular portals. And you can see how did it look. Sorry for the telephone. I hope it's not very annoying. You can see here how these articles look like and how the students were trying to spot fake news. They were actually trying to assess the reliability. So generally, some differences might be found between reading patterns of credible information and manipulated and false articles. In the case of genuine articles, real news, students were more likely to return to individual parts of the text. So we had more of this trying to read again, especially in a title. The real information was written in a more difficult language, and the articles contain more facts, some numerical data, for example, about votes, some dates. And you can see that students were really trying to verify the articles. They were really trying to read, for example, the dates, the sources. They were looking for the authors. And we call it vertical reading. And as you will see in the results, vertical reading might not be enough to verify the information in the era of fake news. So here are the results. And we can see that material B got the highest rating. So it was perceived as the most reliable. And it's good. It's a good result. It was a true material. Then we have a very similar ratings for material H, which was also real information, and C, which is manipulated, fake news. And the lowest rating for D, which is this classic fake news. Oh, sorry. So students base their rating on the fact if they can identify the source. Have they ever read something on this portal, or have they heard about it? And secondly, on its the personal reputation of the source. So to be honest, if they trust the source or not. In the case of manipulated material C, few respondents expressed certain doubts about the reliability of this text. The style of the text seemed inappropriate to them. However, the apparent fact of origin from the well-known and highly rated source convinced them to give the article quite high marks. So they knew that something was wrong, but when they saw that it was published on this particular page, they thought it cannot be false. So they assessed it quite highly. In most cases, students had not heard earlier about the events described, as well as about the negative verification of the verification made by fact checkers. And they explained that they were generally not interested in politics or public life. Due to this, they could not compare the information presented in the materials with their own knowledge. A few people who heard or read about similar events or actors involved in them assessed the credibility of the displayed information slightly higher than people who never heard about it at all. So this is the phenomenon that we called illusory truth effect, rating repeated statements as more accurate than the new ones. And that's why immunization for fake news doesn't work. If you're not interested in a particular topic, for example, politics in your country or other countries, medical information, it is very difficult to tell if a given information is true or not, if that's a fake news or real news. So now when we live in an era of information flood, it is difficult to know everything about every single thing. Especially since in the digital reality, we are increasingly living in a tight information bubbles. Algorithms based on data collected, for example, when we are searching in Google or other search engines, provide us with only selected set of information. And as a result, the user receives information consistent with their views and is not directed to different topics or points of view. And when our friends, contacts in social media have similar views, which is very common, information bubbles turn into echo chambers. So places where we can't hear different voices at all. And it's very dangerous. And we have groups, some groups particularly vulnerable to fake news, and those are seniors and children and young people. Studies have shown that age is the strongest predictor of engagement with fake news, and seniors are generally digital immigrants. It means that internet and new media appeared when they were grown-ups. During the 2016 presidential campaign in US, Facebook users over 65 shared seven times as many articles from fake news sites as young users. And scientists and journalists speculate that cognitive decline might be partially the cause in some cases, but trust is also very important. General trust increases with age, while the ability to spot liars declines. Seniors value especially close relationships, so they might not question stories in their news feeds, thinking, oh, my close friends, my family wouldn't spread fake news. And the children, on the other hand, are digital natives. However, we often overestimate their media and information literacy. I'll give you an interesting example, I think it's very nice, because, you know, what's on the screen right now? Of course, it's a very endangered species, Pacific Northwest tree octopus. And of course, it's a web page that was created in 1998. It's one of those internet hoaxes. And this particular page is often used in information literacy in schools, in information literacy classes in schools, and was actually used in several studies. And in these studies, children aged 11, 12, 13, so not small, the smallest children, they were, you know, teens. They were asked about some parts of the web page and if they would help to protect Pacific Northwest tree octopus. The vast majority of children evaluated this web page as a reliable source, and even those children who thought that it might be manipulated, that it might be something wrong with it, still wanted to help the tree octopus. So information literacy education is extremely important in case of children. As you can see, even if they know that something is wrong, they still want to act based on this information. And now fake news in politics. In normal times, we would probably talk a lot about Donald Trump's statements, the king of fake news, and person who once wanted to give a prize to fake news media. But I think there are more important things to talk about, to be honest, and that is fake news used during Russian invasion in Ukraine. So generally, in our region, we have a much more context to the events that we observe since 10 days. But people in the West, they don't have this context. So for them, it might not be very clear what is going about. And that's why some of the fact-checking institutions try to fact-check the whole idea, the whole base of this conflict. And PolitiFact ruled as false Putin's claims that ethnic Russians were facing genocide perpetrated by the Kiev regime, which is a quote, and that there is no evidence to support it. And actually, international bodies stated that it's international bodies that included Russians stated that civilian deaths have plummeted since 2014 in this region of East Ukraine. So the whole basis of this invasion is manipulation, disinformation. Also, fact checkers at Snopes explained that claims that Russia had invaded Ukraine in order to attack secret US biolabs in the country were part of an ongoing Russian disinformation campaign. So another example. And when the invasion started, a lot of fake news were probably showing up on your Facebook accounts, Twitter wall, a Twitter feed, Facebook wall, Twitter feed. One of them, and for me personally, it is very hurtful. It's a very hurtful thing that is happening. You could probably see the pictures of the destruction of residential building in Chuhuiv and the pictures of this woman. She was on the first pages of many of the newspapers, many of the magazines last week. So you could find claims that these images and clips were from the 2018 gas explosion in the Russian city of Magnitogorsk. And some people claim that, that the woman is also the picture from 2018 and that she was a crisis actor. Someone hired her to act out scene from an attack. And these claims are false. They are intentionally and verifiably false. Photographers can lie, of course, but images metadata confirm that photos were taken on February 24th, 2022. But we can also find some fake news trying to show Russian failures. And you could have seen film with a duel of two planes. The Ukrainian plane was to destroy the Russian one. And according to some internet users, the first of the machines was to be piloted by the mystical ghost of Kiev. And it's a beautiful story, but it is a fake news. Only the sky, trees, and buildings visible in the film are authentic. Planes were added in the digital combat simulator software, and it was confirmed by the game producer. The photo was also posted, which is supposed to show the train from Belarus destroyed by the drone near Kiev. But it is actually a picture of a railway disaster in Poland 20 years ago. So this is a real photo, but it was miscaptioned and presented in the context of recent events, which is misleading. And I regret we have to tackle difficult topics, but these are the consequences of fake news. Sometimes it's very nice and funny to have some fun and look at old Donald Trump's tweets, but the reality is that disseminating false information simply leads to human tragedies. And at the beginning of what became a COVID-19 pandemic, we knew very little about the coronavirus and the illness. You probably remember that everybody was asking questions like, should we wear a mask? What kind of mask? Should we disinfect every single item that we take from the stores? Should we take any medication? And you know, to give you some example, I have an asthma. And at the very beginning, there was a report that people taking particular kind of medication for asthma might be more susceptible to the virus. But after a while, when more data was gathered, it was discovered that people taking this medication are actually less susceptible to catch the virus. So one might ask, so what? Doctors changed their mind, and were they wrong then, or maybe they're wrong now? And the answer is no. More data was gathered, more tests were done, and our knowledge was updated and has moved forward. But let's be real. Medical studies are extremely complex and rigorous, and some people might not be able to understand the nuances of methodology and procedures, especially that scientists use a very difficult language, and often they use statements such as, "To the best of our knowledge, X is," or there is no evidence that X, instead of saying that something is simply X, Y, or Z. So the COVID-19 pandemic has so far shown us just how great the expert knowledge crisis is, that there are people more likely to believe things read on their Facebook wall than medical experts who have been dealing with epidemiology for years. A few more equally important examples, I think. On April 2014, the terrorist organization Boko Haram kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok in Nigeria. And Nigerian government officials called the crime a hoax, fake news, which delayed efforts to rescue the girls and help for their families. In some of the Asian countries, including Myanmar, Facebook is pre-installed in new phones, and it's kind of a synonym to the whole internet. Facebook received heavy criticism for its handling of anti-Rohingya hate speech on its platform. An investigation by Reuters in 2018 found that over 1,000 derogatory posts and comments against Rohingyas and other Muslims were viewable on Facebook, and that this have contributed to the attacks against this minority. And an example from my own country, very sad example. In recent days, in Polish social media, there has been a sudden rush of entries about alleged aggression in the city of Przemyśl. I'm not sure if you know where Przemyśl is. Poland has this small woods at the very southeast of Poland, just a small hook. And Przemyśl is just the last bigger city in this hook. One of the closest cities to Ukraine. So there was a lot of posts that there is an aggression on part of the refugees with a non-Ukrainian appearance, whatever it means. And it was accompanied by the statements to do something about it. I'm sure what you mean. I'm sure you know what I mean. But it's fake news. The police reported no increased number of crimes that has been recorded, and they informed that these types of posts are manipulation aimed at generating fear and negative reactions. Not only comments, not only words, but real life aggression. To sum up, fake news, disinformation, to the greatest extent harms the most marginalized and vulnerable people. Bill Gates will not care much about fake news about himself, but refugees, people without support, victims of violence, for them, it is sometimes a matter of health and life. Okay, now let's talk about how technology helps us to create even more perfect fake news. And we're gonna see if we can see a short film. Nina, could you just tell me if it happened before? Can we see a short clip?
Nothing yet.
Okay. I'll try to do it. Okay, guys.
Great. I can hear and see.
Okay. And let's just focus on what is on the screen of this presenter.
Obama invest in things like high-tech manufacturing, clean energy, and the infrastructure that creates good new jobs. Anyone?
Okay, guys. Which Barack Obama is real?
I think he looks very real on every screen.
Yeah, but it's about details.
I think the left down left, it's fake.
Okay, this one you think is fake?
Can we watch a bit more, please?
We can watch it again because it's a short one.
Look at these images. Now tell me which Obama here is real. To help families refinance their homes, to invest in things like high-tech manufacturing, clean energy, and the infrastructure that creates good new jobs. Anyone?
I'd say a left down corner as well.
Okay, so this one you think is fake?
No, real one.
Real one. Okay. Yeah. Nina thinks it's real fake. You think it's real one. Okay. So are you ready for the answer?
The answer is none of them.
Okay, none of them. There's no real Barack Obama.
Oh my God.
Okay. You see a presentation now or? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Great, thanks. So you may also have across a Barack Obama deep fake. I don't know why people likes to deep fake him, in which comedian Jordan Peele voiced Barack Obama and made his facial movements. He is quite. He can do a similar voice to real Barack Obama, but that's a deep fake. And deepfake is a technology that uses artificial intelligence to create and edit videos or images content to show something that never happened. And it is an image synthesis technique based on artificial intelligence. It is used to combine and apply existing images and videos to source images using a special machine learning technique. And we have actually two techniques, and I would like to show you another video. So the second was 1 second, but I think it's worth to watch it. And sorry. And this is actually a Polish scientific vlogger. She has her YouTube channel is quite popular. And I think she's shown something very interesting. But I think it would be a little bit better if we just watch, and I will just tell what I'm about to say. So the first technique that you can see right now is called facial reenactment. And facial movements serve as a diagram, as a scheme of the facial movement of the person we want to impersonate. And this is actually Polish President Andrzej Duda. That's why it was supposed to be a joke. And as you can see, he's moving his mouth as she's moving them. He's moving his eyebrows, eyes, as she's moving it. Also the head. And the second technique is face swap. And you probably saw some apps to do that. And in this technique, some characteristics of another person's face are superimposed, so generally put over the image of our face. And most of the deepfakes are quite, fun, easy to spot. But when the person is more similar to the one that they want to impersonate, it's getting, we don't have this uncanny valley effect, right? We don't have this strange feeling that we are not looking at the real human face. With some good choosing who's gonna impersonate another person, it might be almost perfect. So be careful what you post online, because the more and better quality visuals are delivered to the AI, the more perfect the deepfake is. So be careful. Oops. Okay, I hope you are seeing the presentation. So we came to the place when we have to ask ourselves a very important question. Since we apparently live in a world where fake news is so common that we have to live with it every day, and we can't believe what we see with our own eyes, can we still talk about the distinction between true and false news, or generally true or false? So some researchers say that we live in a time of a post-truth, in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal belief. The truth doesn't matter. Everybody can have a set of alternative facts that are equally right and helpful facts. If you're interested in this concept, check out the Matthew Dancona's lecture, where he addresses, among other things, Brexit and the 2016 US presidential election narratives. I might recommend it from all my heart. It's very interesting. But not to finish with this very, kind of negative and very cynical point of view, let's talk about our own information detectives, fact checkers. And in 2018 barometer survey we discussed earlier, respondents were asked who should act to stop the spread of fake news, and the largest part of them, 45%, indicated journalists should do that. And indeed, most fact-checking agencies are associated with editorial offices of the press, television, or news portals. In addition, they are sometimes run by NGOs or even universities. And in this chart, you can see that some of the fact-checking agencies are actually older than the concept of fake news itself. But in fact, the largest increase in the number of fact-checking agencies has been seen after 2014. So you might ask, and people ask sometimes, oh, sorry. Okay, but why should we believe any newspaper? Some portals there. What is so different between these fact checkers and other people? They probably has agenda too. But actually, fact-checking agencies, especially those associated with the International Fact-Checking Network, have certain standards that ensure their non-partisanship and fairness and transparency. And you can see on the slides the code of principles, the main point of code of principles, and an example of one of the description of one of these points. So those are not just some ideas, some idea of idealistic statements that they should just keep in mind. The code of principles is a kind of a checklist, and institutions are actually checked regularly to what extent they meet the standards. I've listed here a few fact-checking pages that you might want to review, and take a look at Comprova initiative. It is actually from Brazil, and it brings together journalists from 40 media outlets. So today, it would be easy to check some information, if you know what I mean. We also have the Africa check, which is important one, because in general, information from outside Europe and North America relatively rarely reaches Western fact-checking pages. And for more specific issues, there are sometimes different pages, like, for example, COVID-19misinfo.org, which is for COVID-19 information. They are fact-checking this information. And I found that in Czech Republic, there is a Center Against Terrorism and Hybrid Threats. And do you know this center? Do you use this website, or do you follow them on social media? Did any of you check them? I'm gonna check the chat, but okay, so have a look. And I also found some fact-checking organizations that you might know. I speak very bad in Czech. Manipulatorzy, okay, and Demagog. And I know Demagog because we also have Demagog in Poland, actually. Demagog.
Thanks a lot for this.
A bit easier. This is the screenshots from a couple of days ago. So now it's probably a new news fact checked. Okay, and guys, at the very end, what we can do as media users. And I know that general disinformation about fake news consequences, about deep fakes, about the whole alternative facts idea might be overwhelming. It might be kind of saddening. Sometimes when I read this, sometimes when I do it, I feel kind of, sad that the world is looking like that. But we must not give up hope, because every little action matters. Every little action counts, and our actions can stop the epidemic of fake news, sometimes called infodemic. And a few days ago, I came across this graphic, and with consent of fakenews.pl, I translated it for you. And it shows how fake news spreads, of course, metaphorically. But, I said how fake news spreads. I should say how we spread fake news. So let's imagine that each of us, by spreading fake news, infects 2 or 3 other people with some false information. So when we make a decision not to duplicate unverified information, so when we ask the question, how do you know that? Have you checked if it's true? When we verify the sources and when we verify the information in a couple other sources, which we call horizontal reading, we save other people from fake news. Look, if this person just asked, how do you know it? She or he, they don't spread it further. So we can do it simply by not sharing unverified information. And here are some recommendations from IFLA, how to track down fake news. So first of all, consider the source, click away from the story to investigate the site, the mission, the contact information, read beyond the headlines, maybe just the title, maybe just the headline is so shocking. And so, you know, it's just, you feel so enraged about it, but then you read it and it's not a very big problem. Check the author, but not on the site. Try to Google the name of the author. Do they even exist? Check the supporting sources, click the links, read the reports that it claims to be based on. Check the date. Sometimes the older pictures, as I shown you, may be used. Consider, is it a joke? Sometimes things that are absurd or just so unbelievable are unbelievable. Check your biases. It's also a very important tip. Consider if your own beliefs, if your or if the context that you live in, so social context, doesn't affect your judgment. And ask the experts. Ask a librarian if it's about scientific sources. Consult a fact-checking site. They always have this magical button that says, if you want us to check the news that you found, you can send it. You can totally do it. And generally, keep calm and check the facts and stay positive. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask all of you if you have some your own strategies how to avoid fake news or some shortcuts in information circle. So do you have any?
I might have something, but the problem is that it essentially leaves you with hours of work, because I have a habit of not trusting any fact-checking agency simply because anyone might still lie and it's an official accepted idea. However, it's not true. However, it is necessary. Whatever might happen, anyone can still lie. So what I always do is just do the fact-checking myself, really, which again takes hours, but you get to a result that's true. And I always follow up on everything they say. I always try to look, all right, does this make actual sense? Did this actually happen? And I try to find any evidence for that. And also I just try to follow if it makes any actual logical sense, because if the information is completely illogical, then why would it happen? And there's also the question of, is it important? Is it necessary to deal with this news? And that's also something that one tip that I could actually have that doesn't take hours. If the news is not necessary to be reacted to, if it's inconsequential, just ignore it. It doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah,
If it's important, then yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a very good tip because, you know, social media or generally media works in the way that they want our responses. They want evoke some emotions. They want to be read or watched again. They want engagement. So as you said, if we ask ourselves, do I have to react to that? Yeah, that's first question that we can ask ourselves. And we don't have to react to everything. Some, you know, the clouds are going by in our sky every day, and we might be just observing the clouds and move on. Mm-hmm.
I have one strategy. I'm waiting for more complex commentaries. Like I wait 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, and I will spend a lot of time of reading, but some serious stuff. Yeah.
It's also good to read, you know, I know little about Czech politics, but generally it's always good to read two sides, because in most cases there are two sides of the stories. In most cases there are 10 sides of the stories, to be totally honest. But it's good to read the so-called two sides, also because then we kind of feed the algorithms that we want to know everything. We don't close ourselves in a bubble.
Yeah, and I'm also suspicious for texts or news like this is in that way and it's easy. Yeah, and I think, no, it's not easy. So read more and think more about it. Yeah. Do you have any tips? Or do you have any questions to Magdalena?
If you will have any questions in the other time, there is my email on the presentation. So go ahead, send me an email and we can discuss. It's a very interesting topic and I would love to discuss it with you to get to know what do you think.
And maybe I have one more and last question because our time is over. Do you have any advice to how to deal with some family members, maybe the seniors or older people who we have in our family, and if they are prefer the fake news, and what do we can do with it?
No, it's a very hard topic. It's a very hard because when you sink into fake news, it's really hard to pull you out. But the smarter people than me say that you shouldn't say, oh, it's not true. You are believing in lies. You are wrong. Because then this people is just shutting down. This person is shutting down. And what we can ask is to ask, why do you think so? Why do you think like that? Why do you think that is true? And then hear them out, maybe because, you know, about COVID, a lot of the theories about it is based on our fear. And when we, you know, feel the fear of other person, and when we try to talk about living in isolation, living in fear, living in, you know, for example, without the extended family and what is connected with that, yeah? We can work on those feelings. And when those feelings are, you know, not gone, because they will probably never be gone, but they are not so they are not eating them so much, then we can discuss about the facts. It's quite a long process, you know. Generally, it's very hard to change someone's mind, but generally communication, but one-to-one communication, not discussion on Facebook or Twitter, you know, things like that. Being with others.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the way it's not true because it's like you are stupid to
yeah. But it's, you know, it's sometimes it's so hard to
you don't want to end the conversation like this. Okay, thanks a lot, all of you. Enjoy the rest of our Monday, and see you next week with the topic about religion in the digital age. And thank you again. Okay, have a nice time. Bye.